Capital. After 5 seasons behind the scenes on CBC's Dragon's Den, he moved in front of the camera as the host of The Naked Entrepreneur, which airs on the Oprah Winfrey Network, Rogers, and iTunes. He is a professor of entrepreneurship at Ryerson University's Ted Rogers School of Management and a partner at the seed fund Ryerson Futures. He's Startup Canada's ambassador and was named Mentor of the Year at the 2014 Startup Canada Awards. For a special live presentation of The Naked Entrepreneur, please welcome your host, Dr. Sean Wise.
Good morning, Ottawa. Okay, that's not going to work. This is not an undergrad calculus class. Good morning. Thank you for joining us on Startup Day in Ottawa. It is such a pleasure to be here. We're going to do something a little different today. We're going to do a live episode of The Naked Entrepreneur. Now, before you get too excited, there is no nudity. It is suitable for broadcast. You can take pictures and enjoy. But The Naked Entrepreneur is something that Ryerson created and is broadcast on the Oprah Winfrey Network, on iTunes, on Rogers, and on Shaw. And it is meant to show people a balanced approach to entrepreneurship. We created it at Ryerson because our students were so diverse that they needed diverse role models, not just more white guys from the US showing how to be successful. So we have gone for 5 seasons across this great nation from coast to coast to coast, looking for entrepreneurial stories to inspire a next generation. Today we're going to hear 3 of those stories from 3 amazing founders. I'm going to take my seat and let's meet the first founder.
Please welcome to the stage a man who grew up in Syria watching his father make delicious treats to share with the whole community. Life was peaceful until the family lost their business in 2012 to a bombing raid during the Syrian civil war. Over the next 3 years, uncertain of their future in Syria, his family had to relocate to a refugee camp. Once on Canadian soil, he rebuilt his father's business in Antigonish, Nova Scotia. Please join me in welcoming the founder and CEO of Peace by Chocolate, Tarek Haddad.
Nice to see you. Thank you. I know this is a rapid fire session, so I'll get right to it.
Okay.
How does a good-looking Syrian entrepreneur end up in small-town Nova Scotia?
Well, actually, we didn't pick up the town. They picked us. I mean, it was very interesting when I applied to come to Canada. I only knew the MTV, which is Montreal, Toronto, and Vancouver. And then when I arrived in Toronto, they told me that, no, you're not staying there. And they said, you travel tomorrow to Halifax. And they said, oh, what's Halifax? I want to stay in Canada. And they say Halifax is on the other side of the country. And then even I didn't stay in Halifax. It was a small town that took leadership to bring my family here. They did fundraising. They brought us even before they didn't know anything about us, except that they knew that we lost everything, and we are human beings, we're seeking safety and peace. And basically, we didn't choose Antigonish, but if I have the choice right now, I will choose it again and again and again, because it's absolutely the right place to do business, it's the right place to raise family, to do entrepreneurship, and definitely to have a beautiful life there.
I don't want to minimize the struggle that you went through, but I want to start there. Not everyone recovers from such a struggle, having their businesses bombed, their country subjected to such horrific things. But not only did you bounce back, but you decided to create something new, right? Because you could come to this country and there was lots of possibilities you could have followed, but you chose to do something which is incredibly hard, be an entrepreneur. Did you always want to do that, or was that a cause that you came to understand once you were local in Nova Scotia?
It was, I'm originally a physician. I am a cardiac surgeon.
You're a cardiac surgeon.
I have never imagined that I would be an entrepreneur. Even though my family has lived since 1986, built a giant business, a chocolate empire in the whole of Middle East that was bombed in 2013. But when I arrived in Canada, I absolutely had no idea that what I'm going to do, who I'm going to be. The only thing I knew is that there were people that they were hesitated, they were concerned, they were saying that these immigrants are coming to take our jobs. And then I realized it's not true. I mean, we had skills and experiences, even though we lost everything in the war, but we didn't lose our skills and talents and experiences. These are things that you don't lose in a war. These are things that you raise in your life. And when we arrived in Canada, we definitely found that entrepreneurship is an excellent way for us to give back to Canada, because we arrived here not to take anyone's job. We arrived here to promote jobs, to create jobs, and also to grow our economy in the town of Antigonish. So to answer your question simply, I tried to be a physician in Canada, but a friend told me that if you are a joke, he said, if you are in Toronto, it's safer to have a heart attack in a cab, in a taxi, than having it at the emergency room. And I said, why? He said, because 70% of the cab drivers in Toronto are immigrant physicians, that they couldn't practice in Canada because it's very hard for them to do so.
So was it your choice, or was it the circumstances? Because I would have thought that being a cardiac surgeon and those years of investment, there was still need for it. We still have need for cardiac surgeons. It wasn't that your credentials weren't out there. So did you choose this life, or did the circumstances help you to see the opportunity?
I just realized that it's never too late to become a physician again. I can become a physician after 5 years, after 10 years, it doesn't matter. But there was an opportunity. I call it an opportunity more than the circumstances. And it's the second largest country in the world. And there is a place for everyone to do anything he wants. And entrepreneurship for me is the code that I always say, which, as Reid Hoffman said, he said, it's like jumping off cliffs and building a plane on the way down. That's exactly what it is for me. It's like being remarkable, being different. And I know that there are tons of chocolate companies in the country. Canada was not like in the urgent need for chocolate, but it was in an urgent need to raise awareness of peace. And that's exactly what is unique of our business. I believe that peace is the noblest value on earth that everyone should fight for. In Syria, if you came to me in 2010 and told me that my family would lose their factory in an airstrike in a blink of an eye, I would say it's impossible. Impossible. No one would have ever thought that the war would just happen and just rise to destroy our lives and just for us to leave. So I want Canadians not to take peace for granted, to think about the other people from across the globe that they are suffering because they lost their peaceful lives. So that's basically the mission.
Now, you mentioned that there already are lots of chocolate companies, from Laura Secord to more recent entries. But entrepreneurship is often about addressing an unmet market need, seeing an opportunity. How do you blend the two? What was the opportunity that led you to want to create this company?
It was mainly the social side of the entrepreneurship. It was not only building a profitable business, it was not only focusing on the sales as much as sharing the story. I have done more than 400 speeches in 2 years. I have done more than 600 interviews. Our story has been on The Guardian, on New York Times, on BBC, on CNN, and everything that I am doing actually, people, they usually just like make me laugh sometimes. They say, how do you own a chocolate factory and you are slim? And I say that this is part of the marketing, right? Like if you see me like a 300-pound guy, you won't buy chocolate because you'd see that, it's so much calories. But just like, see me. And so that's part of it. And I completely admire the way that my family is approaching. It's a family business. I am the founder and CEO now, but everyone in the family is involved in the business. And our employees are all involved in the core values. They definitely don't come only for the payroll at the end of 2 weeks. They come because they believe in what we believe, and they want to make the world a more peaceful and happier and safer, because they truly believe that as my family lived in despair, in uncertainty, in unthinkable moments, they definitely want to share that with the whole world. Now, with every piece of chocolate we are making, with every chocolate bar we are making, we are sharing part of our soul, we are sharing part of our message. And our company started with one employee in 2016. The employee, we brought him back from Alberta. He traveled from Nova Scotia to Alberta to find a job. I called him back. I brought him to Antigonish back with his family. And because we knew that the population was decreasing there. And now, from one employee in 2016, now we have 40 employees working right now in the factory. So that was really a very heartwarming thing to see that the expansion is happening. And at the end of the day, it's more about the goal of the company that started with a piece of chocolate in the home kitchen in Antigonish 2016 to be on the international stage by the Prime Minister Justin Trudeau when he went to the United Nations and mentioned our story in front of the presidents of the world, you would have never saw Barack Obama checking his phone and checking our Beast by Chocolate Facebook page. I saw that video, and I was very impressed to see that, because it means that there is, if you have a story, it's your responsibility to go and share it. And then it would be a wave that you will be very surprised where it can take your business. That's exactly how it started.
Where do you see it taking your business in the years to come?
We have a very optimistic goal in the company. We are working very hard days and nights now. We are running 18 hours facilities, whether in our shop, in our factory, but in the next short term, let's say 5 years, I definitely see that there's a great opportunity for Peace by Chocolate to be one of the top 5 chocolate companies in the country. Now, we started in Antigonish, Nova Scotia. We expanded to the regional northeastern Nova Scotia. We were all across Atlantic Canada on Christmas 2017. Now our products are available across the country in all Sobeys stores from coast to coast to coast. By the way, I was explicitly told not to make any advertising for Peace by Chocolate, but it's really a delicious, creamy milk and dark and white chocolate.
And it keeps you slim, too.
It keeps you slim.
Keeps you slim. Always be an entrepreneur, always be promoting. We're going to have to wrap up, but I want you to share a piece of advice with other entrepreneurs. Most people who are in entrepreneurship deal with hardship, but very few deal with hardship at the level that you've had to struggle through. So looking back at it, and it is recent, what advice can you give the next generation of social entrepreneurs that are coming up, the next generation of entrepreneurs who may not deal with airstrikes and the loss of family business, but will wake up each and every day and struggle?
Right. Well, at the end of the day, it's not only about for young entrepreneurs. It's like a general advice. When we say that for any one of us in this country or in the peaceful countries that we had a bad day, can you compare your bad day with the people that they are living in such circumstances where they are losing family members, they are losing businesses, they are losing their kids, they are losing their families? It's not a bad day. It's only that you had a bad moment, that you just woke up and something not true happened. So I truly believe that we should always compare our situation to the people that they are suffering more than us. And in that, we should be grateful, we should be thankful about where we are right now, and that will give us great motivation forward. The second thing is, I share that so much because it is never wrong to hire people that they are smarter than you in your business. Because those people that they would definitely drive your entrepreneurship journey, they would drive your business with you. Because if you hire people that they are less smarter than you, it would be your responsibility all the time to think about the future goals, the strategic planning, the expansion, the distribution networks, the marketing, the public relations. Whereas as you hire leaders in your company, your job is just to supervise. You are not really doing that much of the actual job. And the last thing is, that's an advice I got from a very close friend. He said that always the success and happiness is on the other side of your fears. And if you have already started a business, you exactly know what I'm talking about. Mm-hmm. Because when you are in the early stages, the early phases, you absolutely have no idea about where your business is going. Only thing you are doing is that you're translating your skills into reality. You start touching and just testing the water and seeing where it's going. But at the end of the day, it is very rewarding at the end when you see a very great outcome coming into reality, and you are definitely becoming not an entrepreneur, but a real change maker.
Well, I thank you for all that you've contributed to date to the country and all that you've contributed today. Ladies and gentlemen, our first guest.
Thank you a lot. Thanks, Sean.
Thank you. As you can tell, the naked entrepreneur should really be the well-dressed entrepreneur. But let's watch the screens for our next guest.
Please welcome to the stage a CBC Next Gen Dragon. She started her first company when she was just 23. She founded OMX 4 years later at 27, a tech company that supports businesses to scale through public procurement. Today, she is a passionate advocate for advancing Canada's scale-up sector and promoting entrepreneurship. Please welcome to the stage, Nicole Verkint.
Nicole, I saw your video, and the one word that stuck out the most to me was role model. So what does it feel like to be a role model?
God, I don't feel like a role model at all. I actually feel embarrassed by watching that video.
That just makes you Canadian.
Yeah. I don't know. I'm excited. I'm excited about what's been happening in the startup ecosystem. I've seen a huge change. I was raising capital for my tech company, OMX, 7 years ago, and it felt like there wasn't anybody around. I mean, you were pitching venture capital funds, and they would say, well, come back and call me when you have $1 million in EBITDA. Oh, I'm not going to need you then. And so I think that there's been just such a big change in the community. I don't know if you felt it. I've felt it. And so
barriers to entry seem to be
yeah, I am really excited about the number of people that are interested in doing startups and the number of people and women that are coming forward and they have great ideas and they can get a startup off the ground for so much less than sort of what the idea of how much you needed, 7 or 8 years ago. So I'm really excited about what's happening, and if I'm a role model, fine, but of all the people that are coming forward, it's awesome.
So I believe very strongly that investors who apply a contrarian philosophy get the biggest wins. I also believe very strongly that female entrepreneurs are one of the biggest untapped resources in Canada. What do you think about being a female entrepreneur, a female investor, that people don't realize is still true today?
Yeah, so I think you hit it on the nail. I don't think it's about being female. I think it's about that winning formula of having some domain expertise. So for me, I knew about this government contracting, supply chain world. Very weird for back then a 27-year-old girl to know about. So having this domain expertise, but the one magical piece is having a different perspective on it. And so, you might be a waitress, you might be a paper boy, we talked about earlier, and you have that domain expertise, but if you have a slightly different perspective about how that should operate and how that should work, then you're going to have a huge advantage in starting up a company. So I think that's the magic formula, and if you're female and that leaves you a little bit out of the boys club and looking at things a little bit differently, then that's your advantage.
You talked about domain knowledge as sort of being one of the keys to getting an investment from you. What else goes on that list? What else is a must-have for Nicole's checkbook?
Yeah, and I know, I talked about this earlier today. For me, if you're investing in companies at a very early stage, which is what NextGen Den was, it was super early stage, usually tech companies, usually young entrepreneurs. The only data you really have to go on is the entrepreneur themselves. So it's really about looking at this person and saying, are they going to push forward through all of the challenges that are going to come about over the next, really 10 years? You're in it for at least a decade. So the magic formula was one, the domain expertise, so having some knowledge of an area more than the average person might have. And then the second thing for me was focus, so being completely focused on this startup idea, or not an idea, now it's a business if you're going out to raise money. So being very, very focused on it and very, very committed, and so committed that you have the grit to go through all these things you're about to go through. So a book I read years ago is The Hard Thing About Hard Things. Have you read about that? But it's such a good book. It's such a good book because, everyone's like, oh, it's so hard to raise capital. Well, it is hard, but it's hard for a reason because there's only so much capital. But after you raise capital, guess what? There's a million other hard things right after that. And so it's about that grit, but it's really about, to me, having full focus on that business.
Now, you mentioned that a lot of entrepreneurs mistake funding as the end of the road, the milestone to be celebrated. Yet as investors, you and I would say, that's just the gas for the car to keep going. What do you think many entrepreneurs need to know that they don't?
Ooh, it is true though, the morning after you close a round, because most CEOs, they spend almost all their time on it. You wake up, you go, oh shit, like now I'm the dog that caught the car. Now I have to do something with this thing. I think the show that you're doing, The Naked Entrepreneur, is important because we see these headlines, we see these people, and so just raised this much money, and so just exited, and it's become very glamorized, which is good because it'll motivate more people into entrepreneurship. But the work that you're doing in showing the real side of it, that there's usually a lot more failure that has come with, that it is a critical piece of the formula, it is so important, because so many entrepreneurs get in and they fail and they go, oh, I failed, I'm done, I'm gonna go get a job. Well, guess what? That's the first step to figuring out what's not gonna work. Now you gotta do pivot, now you gotta try again. So I think the more we can talk about how that is the most critical part of the formula, the better.
So I think the relationship that Canadians have to failure needs to change.
Yeah.
I did time in Israel, I've done a lot of time in the US. In the US, if you failed 3 times, they say you're waiting to succeed. In Canada, if you fail 3 times, they say, good luck at your government job. But, wow, tough audience. What do you think?
You failed at that joke.
Yeah, seriously. What do you think it will take to change our relationship with failure?
Well, I mean, you're starting it. It does start with a conversation. Sounds kind of cheesy, but we have to be honest about, and we have to have an element of humor about it to say, whoa, that was a crazy failure. And we have to share failure stories. And, you look at all the great innovators through the history of time, that's a critical part of their story. And so when you realize, I'm not going to get to the other part of the story unless I have this part of the story, then you have to, I think it's about having conversations around that and being honest about what it really takes. And the investment community is a big piece of it, because the investment community needs to see a failure and go, great, you've gotten closer. Like, now you're learning, you're actually taking risks, as opposed to going, oh, wow, now I'm afraid, come back when you have $1 million in EBITDA.
You do business all over the world. What do you think Canada's top benefits are on the commercial global stage?
So I'll start with our worst quality, and it's our culture around taking risk and being entrepreneurial, and in particular, the big companies here in Canada, and their desire to innovate, truly embrace it, not say they embrace it, but actually try things and be willing to make mistakes, that sort of thing. So I think that's the biggest problem we have. And then I think that when we start to sell around the world and we operate around the world, our biggest advantage is just that. It's our culture, our way about our multiculturalism, our way about how we deal with other cultures and selling in other countries. I think that's our biggest advantage. But then the flip side of it is you and I joked about, we're just a little bit too nice, I think, sometimes. And we need to be breaking through doors and making things happen and working alongside the big companies in this country and the government.
So as a Canadian, I'll start this next question with, I'm sorry. I don't want to bring this up again, but earlier today, you called out government, in certain parts of the government, for being asleep at the wheel. Oh, so what would you like our federal government to do better for entrepreneurs in this great nation?
I was talking about bureaucratic funding mechanisms and how it's hard. It's very easy to say we support small business, but then if you're not answering emails from small businesses, then it's, you're not really walking the walk. I think that's the saying. What do I think? I mean, my big thing that I always bang on about, and it's because of what I do with OMX, is I think a way to have a huge impact, I've seen it in the States, we're doing a lot of work now with the set-aside program in the US, is around procurement. I love the government's BCIP program. It's such an amazing program because
the program that allows the government
to buy something from a startup. Well, what happens after the year is over? I mean, our year is almost over with our BCIP. Where's the culture around embracing innovative products from Canada? And if we know that government can't buy from innovative companies because of the culture and, it's just normal, it's government, then how do we encourage the companies that sell to government to be encouraged to buy from not just tech startups, but also from indigenous and local and women-owned and small businesses and all that stuff, because those programs are quite successful in other countries. And we talk about a gap. There's no capital in Canada. Well, guess what happens when you go to raise capital? All investors are like, well, how much are you selling? What's your revenue? So really what you need is sales as opposed to capital. And if you have sales, the other stuff starts to come. So I think if there's something that governments and big companies want to be doing, it's around their procurement policies.
Well, I'd want to keep talking to you, but unfortunately, we've got to move on. Ladies and gentlemen, Nicole Verkent.
Thank you.
Last but never least, from the other side of the country, my third guest. Please put your attention to the big screen.
Please welcome to the stage an innovative physician, health leader, and tech entrepreneur from Vancouver. She's the co-founder and chief medical officer of Care Team, an AI-enabled platform defragmenting healthcare. And she is the only Canadian to be named the Cartier Women Initiative Award Laureate. Please join me in welcoming the founder and CEO of Care Team Technologies, Dr. Alexandra T. Greenhill.
To go back to our first guest today, went from being a doctor to being an entrepreneur. Why did you do that?
Well, I think in some cases, entrepreneurs is the way you're born. And later in life, I discovered that until then, things that I'd done that were tolerated by my colleagues and saying, like, why does she always try to make everything better, was actually welcomed by a different group of people that I didn't know. And so it was a bit of an accident, a bit of a discovery that the healthcare system needs innovators, but being an innovator within is very hard.
So let's talk about your innovation and the business you built. What was the unmet market need? What was the thing that was missing in our healthcare system and the way we care for people that you felt technology and your platform could address?
Well, I love the fact that you used unmet market need, because the me 6 or 7 years ago would have been like, what do you mean by that? And so I have to do a shout out to all of the great programs that I followed that actually taught me to explain that. And so unmet market need is a sufficient enough area of business so that somebody would actually pay for your idea.
You learned it well.
Yes, thank you.
That's an A+ on my exam.
And then, so the thing that in healthcare is it's filled with innovation. If you actually Google this, everyone's innovating. Half of it is research aimed at disease treatment, which is very appropriate and very important. The other half is a struggle of trying to improve a certain area and almost like reinventing the wheel in every hospital, in every jurisdiction, and struggling to use technology that is so out of date, it's laughable. I think most hospitals in Canada still use Internet Explorer as the default browser.
Wow, it could be worse. They could be using Netscape.
Oh, they could be using faxes. All of them are using faxes.
We're dating ourselves, I think.
No, they still are. That's the common way of sending information between doctors' offices, hospitals, and pharmacies. And so one of my missions is to kill the fax machine.
Yay! Oh, we have some haters of fax machines. Okay. Speaking of outdated, there's been a lot of talk about the unequal playing field between female and male founders, not just in Canada, but on a global basis. What's your experience been?
Sad but true. I discovered bias before becoming an entrepreneur in medicine, which I didn't think I would experience in my lifetime. I'm a proud graduate of INSEAD Montréal. 70% of my medical school class were women. And I thought that, really appreciate all of the feminists who paved the way. But this is a story of the 20th century, and, this would not be happening to me in my lifetime. And I have 3 daughters, and I'm really worried that it's going to be happening to them in their lifetime.
So what would make you worry less? What can we do at a grassroots, at a government, at an NGO level to continue this dialogue, but more importantly, to fix it for the next generation, to address it?
Well, it's been interesting because whenever women were introduced, all types of diversities benefited. And I think it's that recognition that we talked earlier about soft skills, hard skills in the previous panel. There's a completely different leadership style. There's a completely different priority levels. And just because I'm gentler or softer, it doesn't mean that I cannot take tough decisions. I was actually asked that by an investor. They said, why would I be meeting with you? You're like Canadian. And I think he also kind of looked at me as a woman and said, would you be willing to make a tough decision? And I said, well, as a former emergency doctor, if you suddenly dropped on the floor and needed to be intubated, I can do that in under 45 seconds. How is that for decision making? And so
Did they write you a check or did
Yes.
they have a heart attack? What happened?
that led to a series of conversations, but yes, they write a check.
So can you share some advice for those people struggling with the same issues, which now are being seen more but still aren't going away? What advice can we give entrepreneurs who are facing such outdated beliefs and hardships?
I think some of it has to do with recognizing the champions, and there are many people who are champions, the men and women of all types and stages who want to support the diversity within the entrepreneur community. And so we did an initiative in BC where we put together the logos of all the women-founded businesses. And at the reception, one of the VCs in town stepped up and he says, your poster's all wrong. And I said, excuse me? And they're like, well, it's not pink, first of all. He actually said that. And then he said, there's like a telecommunications company, and like, these are not women businesses. And you're like, well, I didn't say that to him, but he was the reason the poster existed. We need to start, getting people to realize that pink is not everyone's favorite color if they're a woman. It can be, I love pink, but not necessarily. And then we create all kinds of businesses, not just the 4 Fs, which is family, fashion, food, and friends, which is a derogatory term I discovered existed.
I've never heard of it, but it doesn't surprise me.
Yeah.
We talked a little bit in our last interview about role models, and I think you're a huge role model for STEM education, for the science and the technologies and the engineering. What do you think we need to do to get more young people interested and engaged with STEM sciences?
I love that question. I participated in a couple of these sort of a kids coding, women coding kind of initiatives. And it was interesting because in the round table, everyone was introducing their initiative and saying, we should start in kindergarten. No, it's in school. No, in high school. No, it's the parents and the values that they contribute. It's the university and it's the employers. And I literally had to put my hand up and say all of the above, because at any one of those moments, you can lose the person on that trajectory. And we need to concertedly create that effort and create the welcoming environments where, within the workplaces is not a bro culture of, the only way you can show up is in a t-shirt and jeans and drink beer, and otherwise you're not welcome. But I think that the public conversation that's happening today is much better than the conversation that was happening 5 years ago. And we do need role models, because otherwise they can't imagine the path to success, or the path that they see to success is not inspiring.
And I thank you for showing them the path to success with your own story. We're going to have to wrap up, but I want to give you an opportunity to share one piece of advice to entrepreneurs who may still be in the midst of such struggles, may still be receiving negative feedback so that they are thinking about maybe not continuing, or even those in the STEM sciences. What advice can you share?
Well, I think that mental toughness is a prerequisite for entrepreneurs, that you're going to hear probably 20 times more people telling you why you can't do something rather than why you can. So Startup Health out of New York has this really cool, the 8 mindsets of an entrepreneur. They've published that and can share it on Twitter. But one of them is surround yourself with battery-included people. And so it literally is sort of not just removing people who are negative for the sake of negative, but looking for people who are the yes and type of person who will actually help you, or colleagues, peers, investors who are willing to see you fail a pitch, but then walk up to you and say, hey, you could have done it this better, would you like to practice it? But it does take 1,000 tries. I think that every time we do a raise or we do a presentation, I literally have 2,000 versions of my deck. And I practice in front of the mirror with the kids, with my neighbors, people waiting in line to board the airplane, hear the story of my startup. And that allows me to be spontaneous, but also understand different ways to describe it. And it does take fortitude, because you see it, you imagined it, but no one else can. And so, persisting through that is really important, but surrounding yourself by people who can support you as the going gets tough is also very important.
Well, I think you've shared some really important advice here, and I know that you're going to be around the rest of the day. Ladies and gentlemen, our last and final guest. We're going to have to wrap up, but I wouldn't be entrepreneurial if I didn't promote. You can watch The Naked Entrepreneur on Rogers Television Tuesdays and Thursdays. You can find it at nakedentrepreneur.tv. It's available on iTunes, and it appears on the Oprah Winfrey Network on Sunday morning. My name is Sean Wise. I hope you had a good time. Thanks very much.